The centre has filed an affidavit in the Supreme Court in response and opposing the stay of the Election Commissioners Act. The centre has said the independence of the Election Commission of India does not arise from the presence of a member of the judiciary in the selection panel. Remember, the two new election commissioners who've been appointed are through the new method, which consists of a panel of the Prime Minister, a minister, which in this case was the Home Minister, and we had a Congress leader and the leader in the Lok Sabha as the third member, and he had come out and said that he was outnumbered. So this and the appointment came just a day before the Supreme Court hearing in the matter was to take place. Well, let's go across to Vasudha and Ashish now for more. And Vasudha, firstly, the centre, they're putting its point across to the Supreme Court, saying that they're defending the appointment of the election commissioners.
Yes, Gargi, if you look at the centre's affidavit against the petitions filed by organizations like ADR seeking a stay on the appointment of the new election commissioners under this new law, which is basically appointment of chief election commissioners and other election commissioners, the centre has made it very clear that this is, allegedly an attempt to disrupt the political process. Remember, the election body is very important for this humongous exercise that takes place, and it is critical for Indian democracy. The election dates have already been announced. We are going to get into the 7-phased elections in just a few weeks from now. So the centre's affidavit makes it very clear that the independence of the Election Commission of India does not arise only from the presence of a member of the judiciary in the selection panel. This is something that the opposition had also been asking for. The Supreme Court had earlier talked about how the CJI needs to be part of the selection panel vis-a-vis the current process, which has the Prime Minister, a minister who has been nominated, and of course the law minister, and also of course the opposition leader. But clearly the government has been saying that making laws is realm of the parliament and also the government. But in its affidavit, it makes it very clear that certain organizations are trying to create a political controversy right before the elections begin, and elections have already been announced. So that is what the centre's affidavit makes it very clear, and also saying that it's not just the presence of the CJI or the judge that makes the entire process autonomous, because ECI has been working in autonomy for many years now. In fact, the rules were not even in place before 2023 on the appointment of CECs, which the government has tried and put in place. So various points made by the CEC, by the centre in its affidavit, basically against all those petitions that have been seeking a stay on the appointment of the new election commissioners.
That's right. Ashish, if you could give us more details of what the centre has now said in the Supreme Court, and this is after the opposition has, of course, criticized the manner in which the election commissioners are now chosen, and saying that it's something that, what we heard Adhir Ranjan Chaudhary say, that it was already pre-decided. He was given a list at the last minute, a list of just 6 names, and obviously he was outnumbered with the Prime Minister and the Home Minister being on that panel.
Yeah, it's a very crucial time, because tomorrow Supreme Court will hear this petition on 14th. The Supreme Court, that time the petitioner wanted to stay on appointments, but Supreme Court that time did not stay and say, okay, we'll only issue notice. Now the already the election commissioners has been appointed. They are working with the election commission. Now it is very crucial time, because now the centre in his affidavit defending the decision, also saying when legislative has enacted any law, it should be presumed to be constitutional, and there is no allegation or any question against these two newly appointed election commissioners. So political, these petitioners wanted only to create a political controversy, what centre is saying in Supreme Court, and this is very important, because now the new law is already pending pending in Supreme Court. That will come after later, because in that case also centre has to reply. But tomorrow will be the very important hearing, because Supreme Court has to decide whether to stay this legislation or to continue with that. Already there is appointment. Center is saying there is no controversy against these two appointments. There is no questions on eligibility or any kind of their working. So there is no need to go into this or stay this legislation. So it's a very important affidavit, and hearing will be tomorrow. Tomorrow Supreme Court will decide whether to go ahead or dispose of this petition, because there is already two now appointments has been election commission has been appointed. They are working with election commissions, and elections the schedule of election commission is now going on. Yes,
that's right. And the appointments of the two new election commissioners was made on the 14th, and on the 15th was when the Supreme Court was hearing this matter, and that too the opposition had pointed out. But let's now go across to Tanveer Ahmed Mir, senior advocate in the Supreme Court, and Ashwini Dubey, also senior advocate. Thank you so much for joining us. So this, as you know, we are discussing, is a very a key issue, somewhat controversial, but the centre saying that it's the opposition that is unnecessarily trying to create a controversy over the appointment of election commissioners. The centre filing an affidavit in the Supreme Court a day ahead of when the Supreme Court takes up the matter, opposing the stay on the Election Commissioners Act. Tanveer Ahmed Mir, first your comments.
Yes, you see, the centre, of course, having appointed the two commissioners, will go to any extent to defend their appointment. And the Supreme Court is cognizant of the fact that under the earlier law and even the judgments passed by Supreme Court, the Honorable the Chief Justice was a member of the committee that would appoint, the election commissioners. That was done away by the government by bringing in a legislation. So the issue before the Supreme Court will remain that whether government brought in a new legislation only in order to wipe out an earlier Supreme Court judgment. There, the Supreme Court on number of occasions have observed that if that is a fact, then they would be willing to strike down that kind of legislation. I repeat, where Supreme Court is of the opinion that a subsequent legislation is brought only to undo a Supreme Court judgment, nothing stops from the Supreme Court to strike down that law. But until and unless that law is not struck down, the appointment of the commissioners per se cannot be said to be unconstitutional or illegal.
That's right. And coming at this very key moment when we're just ahead of the Lok Sabha elections, Ashwini Dubey, your comments on this?
First, we have to see the 5 judges bench headed by Honorable Justice Joseph. Honorable Justice Joseph then said that the ruling of Honorable Supreme Court will be subject to any law made by the Parliament, meaning thereby, in the absence of specific legislation by the Parliament, when the appointment of election commissioners and chief election commissioner will take place, Honorable CJI would be one of the members. Now the Parliament has enacted a law, and after the Parliament has enacted a law and legislative bringing a law into this, which is constitutional, and the Honorable Supreme Court has also passed their judgment until the Parliament brings the law. In the absence of that law, the judgment was very much clear.
Yes.
And within the domain of the Parliament, the legislative competence, that law has been brought into it. Now it is to be seen whether that law, the law which has been passed by the Parliament, that is called the the Chief Election Commissioner and other election commissioners appointment condition of service and terms of office bill 2023, which was passed by both the houses, whether it is violative to the constitution bench judgment or within the domain of the parliaments to enact a law. And if we see the law, and if we see Article 324 to 329 of the Constitution of India, Part 15, that it deals with the election and establishes a commission for these matters. And the President has the constitutional power. So here it is to be seen that whether the inclusion of Honorable CJI and subsequently the exclusion of Honorable CJI by the Parliament is in the teeth of that the judgment of the Honorable Supreme Court of India or not. But so far as the legislative competence is concerned, if we see the constitutional, the legislative competence of the Parliament, that is very well versed with the Parliament. And Parliament has passed that law, and Supreme Court has also said this, that this ruling will be subject to any law made by the Parliament, which means the Parliament can bring a law to undo it. And this is which is to be seen by Honorable Supreme Court. So let's see what will happen. And now, subsequent thereto, by virtue of that law, 2 election commissioners have already been appointed. They have taken the charge. They have started
what would you
functioning.
say on the,
so let's see what will happen
what
tomorrow.
the opposition had pointed out, how the 2 election commissioners, commissioners were appointed just a day before when the Supreme Court was to, conduct the hearing on the 14th. They were both appointed just a day before this matter was to be taken up by the Supreme Court at the time.
But there was just when after the resignation of one of the election commissioner, when the post vacated, only CEC was there. So that the appointment took place. And if we see the appointment of the the election commissioner is that one of the highest service, the bureaucrat of the country who has served as a secretary of that, and the search committee conduct the names, discuss about their credentials, throughout their service records, and that then finally sent to the Honorable Prime Minister and the Union Minister and Lok Sabha and the leader of opposition of Lok Sabha, who finally issue the orders. So that is which is there. But ultimately, the final question, the constitutional validity, has to be looked into by the Honorable Supreme Court, whether the bill which has been passed, because here not the appointment which is in question, here the legislative competence of the Parliament, which is being looked into, which will be looked into. Yes.
Right, Tanveer Ahmed, your comments on that, and in a sense, with the appointment of the 2, election commissioners, one expert had said that the matter is it seems infructuous, that now they have been appointed, the elections have been announced, and they're well on their way of conducting it.
See, actually, it is not a matter of appointing 2 election commissioners. What is important for a robust democracy, where the welfare ultimately is of the entire 135 crore people of this country, including 100 crore voters, is that since the Constitution, right from the date of its promulgation and incorporation, kept the Election Commission of India and its appointment as in a separate jurisdiction and at an arm's length in comparison to the party in power and the executive, the idea was that there should be complete transparency in appointment of election commissioners, so that the commissioners who are appointed do not act or portray or appear to be team members of any political party, whether they are in power or not. The Supreme Court, therefore, tomorrow will be contented with the proposition that how this country in its election, in electing its representatives, will treat the element of transparency, just like judiciary gets separate from the government. The appointment of a judge and his removal is not in the hands of the government, but constitutionally secured. Similarly, the appointment of election commissioners also has to be kept constitutionally secured. Only a person who has ill motives will say that let me have overwhelming power in appointment of the election commissioners, so that the people who I appoint will tomorrow be working for my interest rather than the interest of 135 crores. The Honorable Supreme Court is being looked at by the entire Indian Union, that whether they will work on constitutional ethics and constitutional...
All right, quick comment, Ashwini Dubey, on this? Because at the heart of this petition is to have a free and fair election. And we do know the opposition has had certain, issues in the past with the Election Commission. They feel that a lot of the complaints they make have not been treated with fair. All that was there when the press conference happened. And, the opposition has often felt that their complaints aren't taken into account, whereas the others, that they're in fact penalized sometimes by the Election Commission. So, there should never be any sort of shadow of doubt on how the Election Commission is conducting the elections.
My answer is that whether is there any allegation made against the election commissioners who have been appointed for the bias? Is there any mala fide has been apprehended or in future is going to happen, which has been sought in the petition? Whether anything has come into the domain, whether these two election commissioners which have been appointed by virtue of a law which is in existence, and that law which hold the field now has not been varied, amended, reviewed or stayed by Honorable Supreme Court. That question arises, and that is what which is to be. And this question is not there whether these two persons have any the negative credentials or positive, because the search committee first conduct the name, then send it to for the panel. Now the question is whether the constitutional the parliament's decision taken within the constitutional domain, that too when there is a constitution bench judgment of Honorable Supreme Court, which said that Honorable CJI would be one of the member, is the Honorable CJI or any other person nominated by Honorable CJI should be there or not? This is the one question which is here, and whether the law is constitutionally passed or whether the law is arbitrary and violative to the constitutional provisions. This is to be looked into. Let's see what will happen tomorrow. But
all right. Well, thank you so much, Ashwini Dubey, for joining us.